Tyler Weston returned to his Los Angeles mansion earlier than expected, hoping to surprise his 7-year-old son, Ethan, and his fiancée, Ava. But the house was silent, too silent. Moments later, he followed the sound of a child's broken sobs to an old storage shed behind the property. What he found inside would shatter his trust, ignite his fury, and unravel the darkest truth hidden within his own family. Tyler Weston had never planned on coming home that day. His business trip to New York was supposed to last another week, filled with back-to-back investor meetings, late-night strategy sessions, and the constant hum of Manhattan energy that usually fueled him. But the deal wrapped early, much faster than anyone expected, and as he stepped out of the conference building into the sharp winter sun, an impulse hit him harder than the cold air: go home. Not tomorrow, not after the weekend, today. For months he'd been trying to balance work, fatherhood, and the upcoming wedding, and for once he wanted to do something spontaneous. Something that reminded Ethan he was more than just the dad who came home with a laptop still warm from an unfinished project. So Tyler booked the earliest flight out and landed in Los Angeles before noon. Exhaustion clinging to him like an afterthought, but excitement pushing him forward. Ethan would be thrilled, he always was, when Tyler came home early, and Ava would probably tease him for being dramatic, flashing that warm smile that had changed his life the moment he first saw it. He imagined her standing in the kitchen with her sleeves rolled up, planning the wedding menu or flipping through color palettes while Ethan laughed nearby, probably drawing superheroes or race cars like he always did. For the first time in weeks, Tyler felt lighter. He couldn't wait to see them. He drove his black Tesla through the winding streets of Brentwood, the kind lined with palm trees that swayed like oversized metronomes in the California breeze. As the mansion came into view, a sleek, modern structure of glass and stone perched over the hillside, Tyler felt a stirring of pride. It wasn't the house itself, but what it represented: stability, family, a life he had built from nothing after growing up in far rougher circumstances. He imagined Ethan running down the hallway the moment he walked through the door, the boy's little arms wrapping around him, his voice high and breathless with excitement. But the instant Tyler stepped inside, something in his chest tugged sharply. The house didn't greet him the way he expected. He saw no shoes kicked off near the stairs, no toys scattered, no sign that Ethan had dropped his backpack after school. Ava wasn't in the foyer, and the scent of her cooking wasn't drifting through the halls. Instead, the air felt strangely hollow, like a stage set after the actors had stepped off for intermission. Yet Tyler didn't think much of it at first. Maybe Ava had taken Ethan out for ice cream, or maybe they were in the backyard, where Ethan loved to play near the old oak tree. Even as he set his bags down, he felt that flicker of anticipation urging him deeper into the house. Ava loved surprises. This would be a good one. He walked through the kitchen, expecting to see notes, snacks, something that told him they had just stepped away. Instead, the countertops were spotless, too spotless for a weekday afternoon with a 7-year-old in the house. He opened the back door and stepped onto the patio, the California sun washing over him in a warm wave. The pool shimmered, untouched. The lounge chairs were perfectly arranged. Everything looked exactly the way the cleaning service left it. But it was early, for that they weren't scheduled until the next morning. A tightening sensation curled in Tyler's stomach. He called out Ethan's name, loud and cheerful, projecting confidence he no longer fully felt. No answer. He called for Ava, hoping she'd round the corner with some explanation that made perfect sense. Still nothing. He tried to laugh at himself. Don't be paranoid, he thought. The property was big. Maybe they were exploring the back acreage or playing some elaborate hide-and-seek game Ethan had invented. He had a vivid imagination, too vivid sometimes, but it was one of the many things Tyler adored about him. He walked further across the yard, through the manicured grass and toward the steel fence that enclosed the older section of the estate. When Tyler had bought the property, the real estate agent mentioned the previous owner used to keep horses there. But now it was just a collection of storage sheds and an abandoned maintenance building no one bothered to renovate. Even Grace and Linda, the longtime housekeepers, didn't go there unless absolutely necessary. As Tyler approached that corner of the property, something pricked at the edges of his consciousness, a faint, irregular sound. He stopped, listening harder. His heartbeat thudded first, too loud, too fast from days without rest, but beneath it there was something else. A soft, jagged noise that didn't belong in a quiet backyard on a California afternoon. It was thin, uneven, and carried a kind of rawness that clawed directly at Tyler's instincts. He stepped closer. The sound grew clearer, but hearing it didn't ease him. It made his chest ignite with dread. He recognized that noise, even though he had rarely heard it from Ethan. It was the unmistakable sound of a child trying to cry quietly. The kind of crying that wasn't thrown in tantrum but squeezed out as if the child had run out of breath or hope. A cold rush cut through Tyler's whole body. He broke into a sprint, running across the property faster than he realized he could move. His legs weren't operating on thought. They responded to something primal, something fierce, something that made his vision narrow and sharpen all at once. He reached the shed door. It was old, weathered, and latched from the outside. For a second, Tyler couldn't breathe. He didn't think. He tore the latch open and shoved the door wide enough to squeeze through. What he saw inside would rupture the foundation of everything he believed about his home, his relationships, and the safety of his son. The moment his eyes landed on Ethan, small, shaking, curled up on the dusty floor with his artwork shredded around him, something in Tyler Weston shattered beyond repair. Tyler's mind struggled to process what he was seeing as he stepped farther into the cramped storage space. The single window high on the wall let in a muted streak of afternoon light that cut through the dust floating in the air. Ethan was huddled in the corner, clutching his knees tightly as if trying to make himself smaller, his face blotched from crying, his breath hitching in uneven gasps. Torn drawings were scattered around him, bright sketches of superheroes and rocket ships, now shredded as though someone had taken deliberate pleasure in destroying them. Tyler's heart lunged toward his throat, and his body reacted before his thoughts could catch up. He rushed to Ethan, dropping to his knees on the gritty floor, his hands shaking as he reached for his son. Ethan flinched at first, instinctively recoiling, and that single, reflexive movement stabbed Tyler harder than any blade could. His son, his little boy, who used to run to him with complete trust, had jerked away, as if expecting more harm. But then Ethan recognized him, and the resistance melted. He threw himself into his father's chest, small arms locking around Tyler's neck with a desperation that shattered every last piece of composure Tyler had. Tyler wrapped his arms around Ethan with a protective force he didn't know he was capable of, pulling the boy tight against him as his mind spun wildly. How long had he been trapped in here? Who would do this? Why hadn't anyone in the house noticed? Questions smashed through him in rapid fire, none with answers. He felt Ethan's tears seeping through his shirt as the boy trembled uncontrollably, and Tyler rocked him gently, murmuring words he hoped would anchor the child enough to breathe again. "Dad's here, I've got you, you okay, you safe." Even hearing himself say the words felt wrong, because clearly Ethan hadn't been safe, not for a while. Tyler's throat tightened painfully as guilt surged through him. He had been in New York discussing $1,000,000 deals, trusting his home and the people in it to keep Ethan protected. But all along something terrible had been happening behind his back. As he looked around the small room, the reality only grew darker. The latch had been closed from the outside, meaning someone had intentionally locked Ethan in. Someone had locked a terrified 7-year-old boy inside a dirty storage shed with no explanation, no comfort, and no regard for how horrifying the experience would be. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was cruelty. Tyler scanned the ground and noticed the broken crayons scattered among the ruined drawings. Ethan loved coloring more than anything, loved creating worlds on paper. Someone had taken that joy and crushed it piece by piece. His jaw tightened, anger growing like wildfire beneath his skin. The urge to protect his son was quickly evolving into the urge to confront whoever had dared to hurt him. As he lifted Ethan into his arms, the boy buried his face deeper into Tyler's shoulder, his small fingers clinging with desperate strength. Tyler adjusted his hold, supporting Ethan's weight as he stood up, his legs stiff from kneeling on the concrete floor. He moved toward the door, pushing it open with a sharp motion that sent it banging against the shed's exterior. His pulse thundered, not from the effort but from the need to take action, to demand answers, to understand who had turned his home into a place where his child suffered. As he stepped out into the backyard, the warm California breeze swept across his skin, a stark contrast to the storm building inside him. The sunshine felt distorted now, mocking almost, as if the world outside remained unchanged while everything inside him had been violently rearranged. He carried Ethan toward the house, whispering soothing words that felt painfully inadequate. The boy had quieted down but was still trembling faintly, his fingers twisted tightly in the fabric of Tyler's shirt. Tyler pressed a kiss to Ethan's forehead, his chest tightening as he felt the heat of the child's lingering fear. They were halfway across the lawn when Tyler spotted movement near the patio, two figures rushing out from the sliding glass doors with alarm etched across their faces. Grace and Linda, the longtime housekeepers, looked frazzled, breathless as they hurried toward him. Grace lifted a hand to her mouth in horror when she saw Ethan clinging to him. Linda looked pale, as though she already knew what he had found. Tyler's stride didn't slow. If anything, he walked faster, his anger sharpening with every step. When he reached them, neither woman spoke immediately. Their eyes darted anxiously between Tyler and Ethan, then toward the direction of the abandoned storage shed, as if afraid something or someone might be watching from afar. Tyler stopped just feet away, adjusting Ethan's weight in his arms before leveling an intense stare at both women. "You two are here every day," he said, his voice low but vibrating with emotion he barely contained. "How long has my son been out there? Who did this?" Grace's gaze dropped sharply to the ground, her throat working as she tried to swallow. Linda's hands trembled visibly, and she wrung them together, casting a panicked look at Grace before gathering the courage to meet Tyler's eyes. "Mr. Weston, we didn't know you were coming home today," she said in a strained voice. "If we had, that's not what I asked," Tyler snapped, the words cutting through the air. Ethan reacted to the tone, flinching slightly, and Tyler immediately softened his grip, lowering his voice again. "It's okay, buddy. I'm not mad at you." Then, eyes blazing, he turned back to the women. "Tell me the truth. Who locked him in there?" Grace finally looked up, and the anguish in her eyes was unmistakable, but so was something else, fear. Deep, unspoken fear. Her lips trembled, opening as if to answer, but Linda suddenly stepped in. It was Ava," she said quickly, the words spilling out as if she couldn't hold them back. "She took him out there earlier today and said he needed to be punished. She told us not to interfere." Tyler stared at her, stunned. Ava. The woman who read bedtime stories to Ethan every night, who made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs on weekends, who always encouraged Ethan's creativity. Ava locked him in a shed. The claim collided violently with everything Tyler knew about her. Yet Ethan's bawling, the shredded drawings, the locked door, they all pushed against his judgment, warping it with emotional force. His brain fought to make sense of it, but the pieces snapped together too easily under the weight of fear and fury. "Ava did this," he repeated, voice rough. Linda nodded vigorously, avoiding his eyes. Grace wiped her hands on her apron, blinking rapidly as if trying to keep herself from breaking down. Tyler's heart slammed painfully in his chest. He had trusted Ava. He had believed she loved Ethan. But right now, with his son shaking in his arms and two women confirming what he saw with his own eyes, doubt crashed over him like a wave strong enough to pull him under. He didn't have room to question anything, not yet. All he could feel was betrayal simmering into scorching rage, and Ava, wherever she was in the house, was about to face him. Ava stood near the center island of the kitchen, flipping through a stack of wedding venue brochures. Completely unaware of the storm that was about to break upon her, she'd spent the entire morning trying to distract herself with planning, hoping it would keep her mind off the growing tension between her and Margaret over the past weeks. Margaret had been colder than usual, dropping veiled comments about Ava's upbringing, her lack of pedigree, the fact that she didn't come from old money. Ava tried to shrug it off, but deep down, something in her knew the woman's disdain was more than simple snobbishness. It was a warning. She just didn't know of what, at least not yet. She looked up when she heard footsteps, expecting Grace or Linda coming to ask if she needed help with dinner prep. Instead, Tyler stormed into the room with Ethan in his arms, the boy clutching him with a fear that hit Ava like a physical blow. Ethan's cheeks were red, his eyes swollen, his breath shaky. Ava's heart dropped, her pulse stumbling over itself. She took a step forward. "Tyler, what happened? Why does he look like that?" Tyler didn't answer right away. His chest rose and fell with harsh, uneven breaths, and he stared at Ava with an expression she had never seen on him before, an expression that made the floor beneath her feel unsteady. It was something dark and wounded, something on the edge of breaking. Ava felt her own breath falter. Tyler, talk to me. Is Ethan hurt? She asked again, her voice shaking now. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't yet know how catastrophic the moment would become. Tyler shifted Ethan slightly in his arms, the boy tightening his grip around his neck as though the mere sight of Ava frightened him. That single reaction stabbed through her. Ethan adored her. He was the reason she had even said yes to Tyler. The boy had become her world as much as Tyler had. Don't, Tyler said sharply when she reached toward Ethan. The word hit her like a slap. She froze mid-step, her hand suspended in the air before letting it fall back to her side. Don't come near him, Tyler repeated, his voice thick, part fury, part hurt, part disbelief. Ava blinked, completely thrown. Tyler, what are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about, he shot back, jaw tight. His arms tightened protectively around Ethan. I found him locked in the old shed, crying, shaking, surrounded by his drawings ripped to pieces, and Grace and Linda told me everything. Ava stared at him, mind blanking. It felt like her brain was trying to translate a foreign language. What? She breathed. The shed. What do you mean you found him there? Why would he be stopped? Tyler snapped again, louder this time. Ethan whimpered quietly and burrowed deeper into Tyler's shoulder. Ava's stomach twisted. Don't act clueless, Tyler continued, voice breaking on the edges. They said you took him out there, that you locked him inside, that you've been disciplining him whenever I'm away. Ava's lips parted in pure disbelief. What? Tyler, no, I would never. Don't lie to me, he roared, the pent-up fear and fury exploding in a way that made Ava flinch back instinctively. His face contorted with anguish, eyes glassy, breath ragged. He was terrified, Ava, terrified. And you expect me to believe you don't know anything about that? Ava shook her head slowly, her knees threatening to give out. Tyler, I didn't do that. I swear to you I didn't. I love him. You know that. You know I would never hurt Ethan. Do I? He asked bitterly, and the question gutted her. He had never spoken to her that way before, not even close. Ava's voice cracked. Yes, you do. Tyler, look at me. You know I would never lay a hand on your son. Then explain why the people who have been with this family for 10 years say otherwise. He demanded. Explain why Ethan reacted to you like that. Explain why he was in that shed at all. Ava felt her pulse thundering in her ears. None of this made sense. Grace and Linda, they genuinely liked her, or so she thought. And Ethan reacting that way. Something was off. Something was very, very wrong. But Tyler was already spiraling, consumed by fear and betrayal, and she didn't know how to reach him through it. Tyler, please, she whispered. Think, you know me. You know I would never abuse your son. I don't know anything anymore, he muttered, voice cracking. He looked away from her, as if meeting her eyes physically hurt him. Ava felt tears sting her own eyes now. She swallowed hard, trying to keep her voice steady. Let me talk to him. Let me know. Tyler cut in immediately. You're not going near him again. The words were final, cold, absolute. It felt like a door slamming shut in her face. Ava's breath hitched. Tyler, please don't do this. You're not thinking clearly. Something else is going on. I swear to you, I didn't hurt him. You have to believe me. I don't, he said, and the bluntness of it shattered something inside her. He adjusted Ethan in his arms again, and took a step back as if physically separating them would erase the connection she had built with the child. You need to leave. The room spun. What? She whispered. Get your things, he said, voice trembling with volatile emotion. You're leaving this house in the next 10 minutes, or I'm calling the police. Ava stared at him, chest tightening, vision blurring as the weight of his words settled heavily over her. 10 minutes. 10 minutes to leave the home she'd been building with him. 10 minutes to leave the boy she loved like her own. 10 minutes to lose everything. She opened her mouth, desperate to fight, to plead, to make him see reason, but then she saw something in his eyes. It wasn't hatred, it was devastation, and broken people didn't listen. Broken people blamed the nearest wound. Ava forced herself to breathe. Tyler, she whispered, you're making a mistake. Not as big as the one I made letting you near my son, he fired back. The statement physically rocked her, like a punch straight to the ribs. Her hands clenched uselessly at her sides as she swallowed the rising wave of hurt. She looked at Ethan one last time. The boy's face was pressed against Tyler's shoulder, and though she couldn't see his eyes, she could sense something was wrong. Ethan wasn't scared of her. He was scared of something else. Something or someone behind all this. But Tyler didn't see it. Couldn't see it. and Ava realized that whatever truth existed was buried under layers of manipulation she hadn't yet unraveled. But she would, for Ethan, for herself, for the family she still believed they could be once the truth came out. She blinked back tears. "I'll go pack," she whispered, voice raw. Tyler nodded stiffly, refusing to look at her again. And as Ava walked out of the kitchen, a heavy ache settled in her chest, not because Tyler doubted her, but because whoever had done this wanted exactly this outcome, and they were winning, for now. Ava walked down the hallway with unfocused eyes, the polished hardwood blurring beneath her steps as if the house itself were shifting under her feet. The familiar layout, the framed pictures of Ethan's school projects, the soft rugs she picked out, the warm accents she added to make the mansion feel like a home now looked foreign. Every detail whispered a life she thought she was building, one she believed was finally solid enough to hold her. Instead, it was slipping through her fingers like dust. She forced her legs to keep moving toward the guest room where she'd been staying, though her body felt heavy, weighed down by heartbreak and confusion. She replayed Tyler's words over and over again. "Get your things, you have 10 minutes. Don't go near him." 10 minutes to dismantle months of shared mornings, laughter, plans, and hopes. 10 minutes to grieve a future she believed was certain. She pushed the door open to the guest room and stepped inside. The scent of lavender from the candle she'd lit early that morning still lingered in the air. For a brief moment she closed her eyes and inhaled, gripping the edge of the dresser to steady herself. She didn't cry, not yet. Her body hovered in that numb space where emotion hasn't fully hit, where the shock acts like padding, keeping the heartbreak from tearing open completely. But beneath that numbness was something sharper, something rising. Her intuition. Something about today was wrong in a way logic couldn't explain. Ava opened her closet and pulled out her suitcase, tossing it onto the bed with a muted thud. She began folding clothes mechanically, her movements slow and unfocused. Each shirt she touched carried memories, Ethan helping her fold laundry, Tyler hugging her from behind, Margaret passing by the door with a disapproving glare. Margaret. The name flashed across her mind like lightning. That woman had never liked her, not from the first day Ava moved in. She tolerated her presence only because Tyler insisted on it. She questioned Ava's background, her intentions, even her haircut once. Ava had thought it was just snobbery, garden variety disapproval from a wealthy mother who believed no one was good enough for her son. But lately it felt like something else. The way Margaret hovered, the sharp glances she threw whenever Ava picked Ethan up after school, the subtle comments about structure, discipline, and how real families maintain order, the way she insisted Ethan was too sensitive for his own good. Ava's pulse kicked harder. She grabbed her toiletries and zipped them into a small travel bag, her mind racing through every odd moment she had brushed off. She remembered the time Ethan accidentally spilled juice on a carpet and instantly froze with wide, panicked eyes. He kept apologizing over and over, trembling as though expecting more than a scolding. Ava had comforted him, telling him it was okay, accidents happen. But Ethan didn't relax until Margaret left the room. She remembered Ethan whispering once, barely audible, "Grandma gets mad when I make a mess." When Ava asked him what that meant, he had clammed up, shaking his head, refusing to say more. At the time she assumed Margaret was a strict grandmother, not abnormal, not dangerous. But now, Ethan's fear today didn't start with her. Ava's heart hammered against her ribs. Someone wanted Tyler to believe she was hurting Ethan. Someone who had access to the house. Someone Ethan feared. Someone whose word Tyler had always taken as truth. A cold realization spread through her chest. Margaret was behind this. She didn't know how yet, didn't know when or what exactly had happened inside those walls. But she felt it in her bones with the kind of certainty that comes from instinct, the kind that screams even when logic pushes back. She looked around the guest room, the place she'd painted, decorated, and made her own, and the desire to sink into grief was overtaken by a simmering resolve. She wasn't leaving because she was guilty. She was leaving because someone wanted her gone. She closed the suitcase halfway, then paused as something caught her eye. On the bedside table lay a small family photo, her, Tyler, and Ethan at the beach last spring. The boy sat on her shoulders, smiling wide, his hands thrown into the air while Tyler stood beside them, grinning like a man who believed he finally had everything. Ava picked up the frame, tracing Ethan's tiny face with her thumb. "I didn't hurt you," she whispered under her breath. Whoever did this, they were not going to get away with it. Her voice wavered but held firm, anchored by the truth she knew deep in her heart. A sudden knock tore through the moment. Grace's timid voice sounded from the other side. "Ava, do you need help packing?" The question was polite, but the tone carried a strange tension, too careful, too rehearsed. Ava straightened. "No," she called back, her voice cool. "Ivy got it." Grace lingered outside the door for a few seconds too long. Ava watched the shadow under the door shift, as if Grace was waiting for something or someone to arrive. Ava clenched her jaw. They were scared of Margaret. That much was clear. But fear didn't excuse lies. Fear didn't excuse letting a child suffer. Grace's footsteps finally retreated and Ava returned to packing, this time faster. She threw jeans and sweaters into the suitcase with less care, adrenaline pushing her movements. Her brain wasn't frozen anymore, it was sharpening. She needed a plan. She needed to gather proof before confronting Tyler again. She needed to know exactly what Margaret had done before she dared make another move. As she zipped the suitcase shut, a sudden thought hit her so hard she nearly stumbled. The nanny cam. The bear she had bought months ago to keep an eye on her dog, while at work the one she had brought with her when she moved in. It was in the bottom drawer of the dresser. She had tucked it there weeks ago, thinking she'd eventually place it in Ethan's room, just to check on him after bedtime story nights. She hadn't planned on using it for anything else. But now, it felt like fate had put that bear here for a reason. With a rush of urgency, Ava yanked open the drawer and pulled it out, a soft brown teddy with a little bow around its neck. Inside the bow, a tiny lens glimmered faintly. She powered it on, connected it to her phone, and checked the battery. 72%. Enough. More than enough. She tucked the bear gently into her tote bag as a knock echoed again, this time deeper, firmer. Tyler. She could feel it in her chest before she even turned. He wasn't here to talk. He was here to make sure she left. Ava zipped her suitcase, lifted her chin, and gripped the handle. She wasn't going to beg. She wasn't going to argue. She was leaving like he wanted. But she would be damned if she let Margaret win. Not when Ethan was still trapped inside that house with her. Ava walked to the door, paused, and whispered one last vow under her breath, soft, fierce, and certain. "I'll prove the truth. And when I do, you'll know you blamed the wrong person." Then she opened the door and stepped into the hallway, ready for the storm waiting on the other side. Tyler stood in the hallway, gripping Ethan with one arm, the boy trembling softly against his chest as though clinging to the only safe place he had left. Ava's footsteps faded deeper into the house as she went to pack, leaving Tyler in a whirlpool of emotions that churned with every breath he drew. Rage burned through him, rage at Ava for what he believed she had done, rage at himself for failing to protect his son, and rage at the fact that he had been foolish enough to think the home he built was actually safe. But beneath all that fury was something else too, a growing discomfort that he didn't want to acknowledge. A faint scrape in his mind that something didn't add up. Still, he shoved the thought down. Ethan's fear was real. The shed was real. The ripped drawings were real. The women who had worked for his mother for years had pointed at Ava without hesitation. What more did he need? He adjusted Ethan carefully, keeping one hand secure around the boy's back while trying to steady his own breathing. He didn't want to frighten his son further. "Dad's here," he murmured into Ethan's hair. "You were going to be okay. I won't let anyone hurt you ever again." A small nod came from Ethan, but the boy's grip didn't loosen, not even a little. Tyler ran his palm up and down Ethan's back, trying to soothe him, but his mind kept circling the same questions. How long had this been going on? When did Ava start disciplining Ethan? Why hadn't he seen it? The self-blame roared back at him, sharp and consuming, forcing him to grit his teeth against the pressure of guilt. "Mr. Weston." Linda's voice came from the hall behind him. She approached hesitantly, wringing her hands together the way she always did when worried. Grace followed close behind, her eyes flicking anxiously toward the staircase as if afraid Ava might reappear. Is she leaving?" Linda asked in a trembling whisper. Tyler nodded curtly. "She's packing now." Grace released a tight breath that sounded like relief mixed with nerves. "That's for the best," she said quietly, "for Ethan's sake." Those words should have reassured Tyler. They should have solidified the anger he carried, should have fueled the decision he had already made. But they didn't. Instead, a heaviness pressed deeper into his chest, the kind that hinted that the truth might not be as straightforward as it looked. "Thank you both," Tyler said stiffly, "for telling me." Grace nodded, but something about her expression shifted, a flicker of worry, of hesitation, of fear. It passed so quickly Tyler questioned whether he imagined it. Ethan whimpered softly, pulling Tyler's attention back to the boy curled against him. The child's small shoulders shook, and Tyler felt a wave of protectiveness surge through him so fiercely it nearly overwhelmed everything else. He kissed the top of Ethan's head. "We done with her, bud," he whispered. "I promise." Ethan didn't respond. Instead, he turned his face further into Tyler's neck, as though trying to disappear entirely. Tyler felt his throat tighten. The boy had always been gentle, sensitive, but this was more than that. Something had drained the light from him. Something more than just Ava's alleged punishment. As Tyler carried Ethan toward the living room, he began tracing back the signs, trying to piece together the missing details. Ethan had been quieter lately, yes. He'd started eating less, too, and had been waking up from nightmares more frequently. Tyler thought it was because of the upcoming wedding, the huge changes happening around the house, or maybe even school stress. Maybe he'd missed something obvious. Maybe he'd ignored what Ethan was trying to tell him. The guilt pressed harder now, clawing at his ribs. He sank onto the large leather sofa, positioning Ethan so the boy could rest comfortably against him. The living room felt vast and hollow, its high ceilings and expensive furnishings suddenly cold and uninviting. Tyler rocked Ethan slightly, the motion instinctive and protective, and closed his eyes for a moment. He needed clarity. He needed to breathe. But then his thoughts snagged on something that wouldn't let go. Ava's face, when he confronted her. The shock in her eyes, not the defensive kind but genuine disbelief. Her voice trembling, pleading, hurt yet steady, hadn't sounded like someone trying to cover up guilt. It had sounded like someone blindsided, someone wrongly accused, someone who loved Ethan. Tyler pushed the thought away immediately. He couldn't afford doubt. Doubt meant danger for Ethan. Doubt meant opening the door for manipulation. Doubt meant weakness. Yet his chest tightened uncomfortably as another memory surfaced, Ava helping Ethan build a volcano for a school project. Both of them laughing when the mixture erupted all over their hands. The way Ethan had crawled into Ava's lap during movie nights. The way Ava had stayed up through the early morning when Ethan had the flu, holding cool cloths to his forehead while Tyler slept on the couch downstairs. Those memories didn't match what Grace and Linda said. They didn't match the image of a woman who would shove a child into a shed and destroy the one thing he loved most, his drawings. So why did they? Tyler's jaw clenched, frustration building. He hated the doubt clawing at him, hated the uncertainty that seeped through his earlier confidence. But Ethan's reaction wasn't imagined. His tears weren't imagined, his terror wasn't imagined. "Dad." Ethan's voice was small, fragile. Tyler looked down quickly. "Yeah, buddy, are we going somewhere?" Tyler tightened his hold. "Not right now. You staying with me?" Ethan nodded weakly, but something in his eyes, something haunted, made Tyler's stomach twist again. What was Ethan afraid of? Was it truly Ava? Or had something else been happening, something deeper, someone else? No. Tyler shut the thought down, but it clung to him stubbornly. He heard footsteps descending the staircase. Ava. He stood immediately, holding Ethan closer as if preparing for another confrontation. Ava appeared at the bottom of the stairs with her suitcase in one hand and a tote bag slung over her shoulder. Her cheeks were flushed, but her expression was steady, too steady. She looked at Tyler first, then at Ethan. The pain that crossed her face was sharp, almost unbearable to witness. "I'm ready," she said softly. Tyler didn't move. His grip on Ethan tightened reflexively. Ava's eyes flicked to that movement, and her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. "I hope someday you will understand," she said, her voice low but unwavering. "Because this isn't what you think it is, Tyler. And one day it will all come out." Tyler's jaw tightened. "Just go." Ava nodded once, a gesture filled with more heartbreak than tears ever could express. She turned toward the door, ready to leave. And for a moment, Tyler watched her go without saying another word. But what he didn't know, what Ava already suspected, was that the real danger hadn't left the house. It was still inside, watching, listening, and waiting. The front door clicked shut behind Ava, and the faint echo of it threaded through Tyler's senses like a ripple he couldn't stop from expanding. He stood frozen in the foyer with Ethan held firmly against him, watching the last movement of her shadow vanish beyond the frosted glass. For a moment he didn't breathe. His chest stayed locked, his ribs tight as if refusing to allow air back in until the world in front of him made sense again. But it didn't. Everything felt warped. Everything felt slightly off-center, like a painting nudged crooked on the wall. And no matter how hard he tried to straighten it in his mind, the image refused to align. Ethan whimpered faintly and burrowed deeper into his father's shoulder, and the small sound forced Tyler to re-engage with the moment. He cupped a steadying hand around the back of his son's head. "I'm here," he murmured, voice softening. "I've got you." The boy didn't lift his face. He held on with the grip of a child trying to anchor himself to the one person he trusted most. Tyler exhaled slowly. He needed to focus on Ethan, on what mattered. Ava was gone, and whatever damage she had caused, he would undo it. He would repair what she had broken. Yet the thought didn't land as firmly as he expected. It wavered, fragile around the edges, cracking at the first brush of doubt. He tried to push that doubt aside, but it stayed. "She's finally out," Linda said behind him, her voice trembling with a mixture of relief and something else. Something darker. He turned to see both housekeepers standing near the archway, their posture stiff, eyes darting nervously toward the front door as though fearing Ava might burst back in at any second. "You did the right thing, sir," Grace added, though her gaze flickered downward immediately after she spoke. "Ethan will be better off. Things will calm down now." Tyler wanted to agree, he needed to agree, but a strange prickling sensation crept along his spine. Something about the way Grace said it rang oddly, too sure, too rehearsed, too eager. He shifted Ethan slightly so the boy could rest more comfortably. "You both told me she took him out there," Tyler said, his tone carefully even. "You were absolutely sure about what you saw?" Grace swallowed hard. Linda answered quicker than necessary. "Of course, Mr. Weston. We wouldn't lie about something like that." The speed of her response tightened Tyler's jaw. He had worked in boardrooms long enough to recognize when someone spoke too fast, spoken truth didn't rush, fear did. But before he could question it further, Ethan pulled at his shirt. "Dad, can we go upstairs?" The boy's voice was so small it almost didn't register. Tyler smoothed a hand down his son's back.
"Yeah, let's go, buddy."
He shot one last look at Grace and Linda. "We'll talk later." Both women nodded, though neither looked relieved by the postponement. If anything, they looked even more uneasy. Tyler turned and carried Ethan up the sweeping staircase. Each step creaked under his feet, the house feeling enormous around them, too spacious for the two of them now that Ava was gone. He hated that thought. He hated how the air had changed. He hated how wrong everything felt. Ethan's arms tightened as they neared the landing, and Tyler felt the tremor run through his son's small frame. "What's wrong, bud?" he whispered. Ethan didn't answer. His head pressed deeper into Tyler's shoulder as they approached his bedroom door. Tyler nudged it open with his foot, expecting Ethan to feel comforted once back in his own space. But the opposite happened. Ethan tensed, his body going rigid like he was bracing for something he couldn't name. Tyler immediately stepped back out of the doorway. Okay, he soothed. "We don't have to go in there." He carried Ethan down the hall toward the master bedroom instead, thinking familiarity might help. The boy still didn't relax, and that more than anything Ava had said or done made a chill sweep through Tyler's mind. What was he missing? What exactly had Ethan been scared of in that house before today? He couldn't ask, not now. The child was too overwhelmed. Tyler laid Ethan gently on his bed and pulled a blanket up to cover him. "I'll be right here, okay?" Ethan nodded, but his eyes tracked the doorway with a level of fear that twisted Tyler's gut. "Nobody's coming in," Tyler promised firmly. "I won't let anyone near you." He meant it. Whoever hurt his son Ava or anyone else, they would never get close again. Yet the unease wouldn't let go. Ethan drifted into a light, uneasy doze, but Tyler remained on the edge of the bed, staring at the boy's small fingers tangled in the blanket. He ran through the events again and again, trying to piece them into a story that made sense. But the narrative was fragmented. Ava's expression as he confronted her, shocked, betrayed, devastated, wouldn't leave his mind. Grace and Linda's fear felt misdirected. And Ethan's reaction when he passed his own room that didn't track with what Tyler believed had happened. He rubbed his forehead. "What am I not seeing?" he murmured to himself. The question echoed through his thoughts like a haunting refrain. He reached for his phone, intending to email security to change the alarm codes and lock the house down for the night. But as he unlocked the screen, something unexpected caught his eye: a notification from an unknown number, received only minutes earlier. A short message preview appeared: "You don't know the truth yet." Tyler frowned. More spam, a prank. He opened it. There was another line beneath the first: "Be careful who you trust." His breath caught. He scanned the room instinctively, the walls suddenly feeling closer. Then his phone buzzed again with a follow-up message: "Look deeper before it's too late." Tyler stared at the screen for a long moment as unease swelled inside him. What he didn't know, what lurked beneath the surface, was that Ava had already set her plan in motion. She wasn't leaving the truth behind. She was bringing it with her. And Tyler Weston, whether ready or not, was about to confront the first crack in everything he believed. A crack that would soon split wide open. Grace and Linda lingered near the bottom of the staircase long after Tyler carried Ethan upstairs, their hands tightening around their aprons as if gripping fabric could somehow steady their nerves. The foyer felt too exposed, too bright, and neither woman dared to speak first. Linda kept wiping her palms on her skirt, her breath uneven, while Grace stared at the front door Ava had walked through just minutes before. Her guilt sharpening the longer she looked. Everything had spiraled far faster than either of them anticipated. When Margaret told them to lie, she hadn't asked, she had commanded. Her eyes sharp enough to slice through any resistance. They both knew what happened to employees who disobeyed Margaret Weston. Stories circled the staff like whispered folklore, maids fired and blacklisted without warning. Gardeners accused of theft and escorted off the property by security, nannies who mysteriously disappeared from the industry after a single disagreement. Margaret didn't just control the estate, as she controlled reputations, futures, livelihoods. She made sure everyone understood that loyalty wasn't optional, it was survival. So when Margaret pulled Grace and Linda into her room earlier that morning with Ethan hiding behind her skirts, shaking from something he wouldn't speak of, the women had felt their stomachs drop. And when Margaret spun her story that Ava had grown jealous of Ethan, that she'd been disciplining him in secret, that something needed to be done, they felt the trap snap shut around them. Now, hours later, with Ava gone and Tyler's anger still fresh in the air, the weight of their complicity pressed down with suffocating force. Grace tugged nervously at the collar of her blouse. "I don't like this," she whispered. "Mr. Weston, he's not convinced. You saw his face. He kept looking at us like he could tell something was off." Linda's head snapped up. "We didn't have a choice," she hissed, though fear softened the sharpness. "If we hadn't said what she told us to say, we'd be out of work." "Worse, you know what she's capable of." Grace nodded reluctantly. She knew. But knowing didn't make any of this feel less wrong. "What if Ava finds out?" Grace asked. "What if she tells him the truth?" Linda swallowed hard. "By the time she figures anything out, it'll be too late. Margaret always wins. She always has." Grace didn't argue, but the despair in her eyes made it clear she no longer fully believed that. As they stood trembling near the staircase, a soft creak drew their attention. Margaret appeared at the top landing. Her hand rested gracefully on the railing, her posture immaculate as always. Her expression unreadable, but her eyes gleamed with a satisfaction that made both women straighten instinctively. "Why are you two standing around like statues?" Margaret asked as she descended, her heels tapping rhythmically against each step. "You look like children caught doing something wrong." Grace's mouth opened, but no words came out. Margaret paused at the foot of the stairs, her gaze moving between them with a slow, predatory sweep. "Unless," she continued, her tone gentle in a way that felt like a trap lined with velvet, "you're beginning to regret doing what was necessary." Linda shook her head quickly. "No, Mrs. Weston, of course not. We just good," Margaret interrupted, a smooth smile curving her lips. "Because regret is a useless emotion, especially now." She stepped past them, her presence pulling the air tighter. Grace cast a worried glance at Linda, who subtly shook her head, signaling her not to say another word. Margaret stopped in the center of the foyer, glancing toward the living room where Tyler had last been before taking Ethan upstairs. Her smile dimmed, replaced by a calculating focus. "Tyler is emotional today," she said, almost conversationally. "He'll say things he doesn't mean. Do things he'll want to undo." Grace and Linda exchanged a look. Margaret continued. "But he made the right choice sending Ava away. She was never good for this family." Her voice sharpened. "She was ambitious, manipulative, hungry for a lifestyle she didn't earn. Women like her latch on to men like my son, men with money, influence, vulnerability. Grace hesitated. Mrs. Weston, are you sure Mr. Weston sees it that way? He seemed very attached to her. Margaret pivoted sharply, her gaze drilling into Grace with cold precision. My son trusts me, she said, always has, always will. I raised him without anyone's help. I built this household. I kept our legacy intact after his father died. Everything we have, everything he is, it's because of me. Her voice dropped into a darker register. And I will not let some outsider, some unremarkable little dreamer undo any of it. Linda felt her knees weaken. Margaret noticed. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a near whisper. You both did well today. You protected this family. You protected your jobs. And most importantly, you protected Ethan from a woman who has no idea what true discipline looks like. Grace pressed her lips together, dread settling in her chest. She couldn't help but hear something off about the way Margaret spoke about Ethan, ownership rather than care, irritation rather than love. Something in her gut twisted. She knew Margaret could be strict, harsh even, but what if everything today wasn't the full extent of it? What if something much worse had been happening within these walls? Before Grace could think further, footsteps sounded from upstairs. Tyler was coming back down. Margaret straightened instantly, her mask sliding back into place just as he appeared at the top of the stairs. His posture was rigid, his expression heavy and distant, and he carried the tension of a man wrestling with too many thoughts at once. Margaret's face lit up with concern, the kind she performed so well. Tyler, darling, she called up to him, is Ethan all right? I heard him crying earlier. Tyler paused halfway down the stairs. His eyes swept over Margaret briefly, searchingly, and something flickered in them that neither Grace nor Linda had seen before. Doubt. Small but present. He's resting, Tyler said. I don't want him disturbed. Margaret nodded sympathetically, stepping aside as he reached the bottom step. She reached out to touch his arm in a comforting gesture she often used. But Tyler flinched barely, but noticeably before her hand made contact. Margaret froze for half a second, surprise cracking through her composed exterior. It was subtle, but Grace saw it. Linda did too. Tyler didn't appear to notice the shift, or maybe he pretended he didn't. He moved past his mother and sat heavily on the sofa, running a hand through his hair. Margaret approached him with gentle footsteps, her voice softening. This was difficult for you, I know, but you protected Ethan. You made the right choice. Tyler didn't answer. Margaret pushed a little more. She is gone. Things will settle now. Tyler's jaw tightened. Margaret didn't catch it, but Grace did. So did Linda. Tyler Weston might have sent Ava away, but his certainty was already beginning to unravel. Not because of anything Ava said. Not because of anything Grace or Linda confessed. But because his instincts, the same instincts that built an empire, had begun whispering a warning he could no longer ignore. Something didn't add up. And the longer he sat there in his own home, replaying the events of the day, the more he realized one dangerous truth. If Ava wasn't the one who hurt Ethan, then the real threat was still inside the house. Much closer than he wanted to believe. The cold air outside hit Ava harder than she expected the moment she stepped off the Weston property. It wrapped around her like an abrupt awakening, sharp and bracing, reminding her that she was no longer part of the world behind that ornate front door. She gripped the handle of her suitcase until her knuckles whitened, her heart pounding with a mix of disbelief, humiliation, and something far more potent, urgency. She walked toward her car parked along the curb, her breath uneven as everything replayed in her mind like fragments of a broken film, Ethan trembling, Tyler's devastated face, Grace and Linda's accusations, and Margaret's chilling calmness lingering somewhere in the background of it all. Ava unlocked her car, threw the suitcase into the trunk, and slid into the driver's seat. Her fingers hovered over the wheel, trembling just enough to make gripping it difficult. She closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, trying to collect herself. She had been thrown out like a criminal, like some monster capable of harming the child she loved as her own. The betrayal cut deeper than anything she had ever felt. But beneath the devastation was a steady pulse, a quiet but firm beat of conviction. I didn't do this. And I'm going to prove it. She started the engine. Her foot hovered over the gas pedal for a long moment before she finally pressed down. She didn't look back at the house. She couldn't. The pain was too raw. The drive away from the estate felt unreal, like she was drifting through thick fog. The palm trees lining the road blurred past her, the California afternoon glowing gold across the rooftops. Everything looked normal, beautiful, ordinary while her world had collapsed in a single afternoon. She drove to the first place that made sense, her small apartment 15 minutes away, a space she kept just in case. Even after moving into the Weston mansion, some friends teased her for keeping it, calling it unnecessary, overly cautious. But now she was grateful she hadn't let it go. Ava parked and dragged her suitcase up the stairs to her unit. The door clicked shut behind her, and her apartment greeted her with the same minimalistic comfort she'd designed years ago, soft earth tones, quiet lighting, and artwork she'd collected at local fairs. Everything felt grounding compared to the chaos she'd just left. She dropped her tote bag onto the couch and sank onto the cushions, elbows on her knees, hands covering her face. For the first time since Tyler confronted her, she allowed herself to shake once, twice before she forced her emotions back into check. Falling apart wouldn't help Ethan. She sat up straighter and reached into her tote bag, pulling out the teddy bear with the nanny cam embedded inside. She ran her thumb gently over the little bow that concealed the lens. She had grabbed it instinctively earlier, driven by a gut feeling she couldn't ignore. Now, as she held it, she understood why. That house wasn't safe for Ethan. She had sensed it for weeks. Ava tapped her phone and opened the nanny cam app. She scanned the settings: feed active, battery steady, connection stable. Good. With a trembling breath, she began to set up the remote recording function. The bear wasn't in Ethan's room yet. But once she found a way to get it there, and it could capture the truth. She just needed to be smart and careful and fast. Margaret wasn't someone who allowed second chances. Images flashed in Ava's mind: Margaret's cold stare, her controlled smile, her effortless manipulation of everyone in that house. That woman was dangerous. Ava felt it in her bones. She leaned back on the couch, forcing her brain to replay everything from the past month, not just today. Ethan's nervousness, his sudden flinches, the way his eyes darted up the stairs whenever Margaret approached. The way he had once whispered to Ava, "Grandma gets scary when Dad's gone." She hadn't understood then. Now she did. A knot tightened in her stomach as she realized the truth she had been avoiding. Ethan didn't fear her. He feared Margaret. Whatever happened today wasn't the start, it was the tipping point. Ava pulled out a notebook from the drawer beside her sofa table. She flipped it open and began writing everything she remembered: the comments, the looks, the strange bruises Ethan had brushed off as accidents, the shift in his behavior around Margaret, the days he seemed more withdrawn after spending time upstairs. The list grew, each line sharpening her resolve. She needed more than instinct. She needed evidence, hard evidence. And she had a nanny cam ready to deploy, but she needed help getting it back into the house. After a moment of hesitation, Ava grabbed her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found Liam Torres, a longtime friend and tech expert who owed her more than a few favors. She dialed him. The line rang twice before he picked up. "Hey, what's up? You sound stressed." She took a breath. "I need your help. And I need you to trust me without asking why yet." Liam's tone shifted instantly. "All right, tell me." "I need remote access to a camera, and I need a secure server to route the feed through." "Nothing traceable." "Okay, that's doable. Where's the camera now?" "With me," she said. "But it needs to go somewhere else soon." Liam hesitated before speaking again. "Ava, are you in trouble?" Her throat tightened. "No, but someone else is, a little boy, and I think he's in danger." Liam didn't question further. "Send me the model number. I will text you a link in 10. Ava felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness but gratitude. She sent the info immediately. Minutes later, her phone lit up with everything she needed. She followed Liam's instructions, rerouted the nanny cam to a secure feed, and set up a recording archive. Once the bear was placed somewhere in the Weston home, she'd be able to see everything live and saved. Good. That was step 1. Step 2 was far harder: getting the bear back inside. She couldn't go herself. Tyler wouldn't let her within 10 feet of Ethan right now. But maybe someone else could. She thought of Grace and Linda, both terrified, both complicit, both likely aware of what Margaret truly was. They had lied, yes, but under pressure. They weren't evil. They were scared, and scared people could make mistakes, or they could find their conscience. Ava stood up, grabbed her coat, and headed for the door. She didn't have a concrete plan yet. She only knew one thing for certain: she wasn't giving up. Ethan needed her. and she wasn't going to stop until she uncovered the truth buried inside that house, even if it meant confronting Margaret Weston herself. As she stepped out into the fading California daylight, her fear transformed into determination. Ava Coleman had been pushed out, but she wasn't done, not by a long shot. Tyler sat in the dimly lit living room long after Ava's car disappeared down the street, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped tightly together. The weight on his chest felt heavier with each passing minute, a weight he had tried earlier to blame on the chaos of the day. But now he wasn't so sure. Ethan slept fitfully upstairs, exhausted from fear, and Tyler told himself that was the only thing that mattered, that removing Ava was the right choice, that protecting his son came first. But the deeper he sank into the cushions, the more the truth clawed at him from inside. Something wasn't making sense. His mind kept replaying the confrontation, Ava's expression, the housekeeper's trembling voices. Ethan shrinking at the doorway of his own room, and none of it was lining up the way it should. If Ava had harmed Ethan, why had she looked so blindsided? Why had she begged him to think, to remember who she was? Why had she mentioned that the situation wasn't what it seemed? And why, for the first time he could remember, had Ethan seemed afraid even after Ava left? Tyler's stomach twisted. He wasn't a man easily manipulated. He built his company on instinct as much as intelligence, on reading people as well as data. But today he had reacted, not analyzed. He had let fear steer him. He rubbed his hands over his face and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. His mind drifted to the shed again, the torn drawings, the broken crayons, the latch closed from the outside. He had assumed Ava did it because Grace and Linda said so, because Ethan's fear matched their accusation, because the situation looked clear, cut in the moment. But now that the adrenaline had faded, the pieces weren't fitting together. Someone had ripped those drawings with intent. Someone had locked that door. But was that someone Ava? He frowned, remembering a detail he'd overlooked. Ethan had flinched not just when Ava appeared, but also when they passed his own room. Why? His room should have been the safest place in the house. Unless it isn't, Tyler muttered. That thought lingered, growing heavier. Margaret's voice drifted faintly from the hallway as she spoke to the housekeepers, her tone warm and controlled. Tyler closed his eyes briefly. His mother had always been composed, always in control, always ready with an opinion about who belonged in their family and who didn't, and she had made her dislike of Ava abundantly clear. He tried to shake off the unease, but it stuck firmly. When he opened his eyes again, Margaret entered the room, graceful and calm as ever. "Tyler, sweetheart," she said, approaching him with a sympathetic expression, "I know today has been overwhelming. But you handled it well. Ethan will heal." Tyler straightened slightly. "I don't want to talk about Ava right now." Her smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "That's understandable. Still, it was the right decision." He hesitated before responding, "Maybe." Margaret tilted her head. "Maybe." Her tone held gentle surprise, but her eyes sharpened with the faintest tension. Tyler exhaled. "Something about today doesn't feel right." Margaret's smile remained, but it lost its warmth. "You re-exhausted. You re-shaken. Uncertainty is normal after a situation like this." Tyler studied her carefully. His mother rarely dismissed his concerns. She usually dissected problems with him, calculated outcomes, offered solutions. But right now she seemed almost too eager to redirect him. "Did you see Ava take Ethan outside?" he asked. Margaret blinked. "I didn't witness it personally, but the girls said." "I'm not asking about them," Tyler interrupted, keeping his voice measured. "I'm asking about you." Her lips pressed together in a thin line. "Tyler, I don't need to see something myself to recognize what sort of woman Ava is." "You don't like her?" he said flatly. Margaret's eyebrows lifted. "I don't trust her." "That's very different." He studied her face again, looking for cracks, inconsistencies. Margaret Weston was not an easy woman to read. She had spent her life mastering control. But even the most polished facades had fractures. He noticed the faint tension in her jaw, the small twitch in her fingers. Something was off. Before he could push further, footsteps approached hesitantly. Grace and Linda appeared in the doorway, both looking more uneasy than earlier. Grace cleared her throat. "Mr. Weston, do you need anything? Tea? Dinner?" Tyler shook his head. "No." They nodded and turned as if to leave, but something inside him snapped into place. He needed answers, real ones. "Actually," he said, stopping them, "come, both of you." Linda froze. Grace paled. They stepped forward slowly, each movement heavy with dread. Tyler sat upright, his gaze fixed and clear. I want the full story, he said. Every detail, no summaries, no skipping. Start from the moment Ethan left your sight. Grace and Linda exchanged terrified looks. Margaret took a step closer, her presence looming behind them like a shadow. Tyler, she began. They've already explained. I didn't ask you, he said sharply, his eyes never leaving the housekeeper's. Margaret stiffened. Grace stammered, but we told you what happened, sir. Tell me again, Tyler ordered, right now. Every word. The two women trembled visibly. Linda's breath caught. Grace's fingers twisted together. Tyler felt another spike of suspicion. Why did they look like they were standing on a trapdoor? Why did they look like one wrong word might destroy them? Well, he pressed. Grace swallowed hard. Mrs. Weston told us Ava had taken Ethan outside. She said Ava wanted to teach him a lesson. Tyler's expression sharpened. Mrs. Weston told you? Grace froze, realizing her mistake. Margaret's gaze sliced toward her like a razor. Linda let out a tiny gasp. Tyler leaned forward slowly. You didn't see Ava take Ethan out there? Grace shook her head weakly. No, sir. And you didn't see Ava hurt him? Another shake. No, sir. Then why did you lie to me? Grace's lips trembled. Linda stepped in, her voice breaking. We didn't want to, but we were told to. Tyler's pulse roared. By who? That single question hung like a blade. Grace's eyes darted to Margaret. Linda's shoulders curled inward. Neither spoke. Tyler followed their gaze, his stomach dropping. Margaret's expression didn't crack, but her eyes hardened with cold, perfect control. That's enough, she snapped. They reconfused. Emotional, traumatized by Ava's stop, Tyler said, rising to his feet. Don't say her name again. For the first time in his life, Margaret Weston looked genuinely stunned. Tyler stepped around the coffee table, his chest tightening with fury and realization. You told them to lie, he said. You made them blame Ava. Margaret recovered quickly, her voice turning cool. I did what was necessary to protect Ethan. From who? Tyler demanded. Ava. Yes, Margaret answered without hesitation. From Ava. Funny, Tyler said, his voice trembling with anger. Because the only person I've ever seen Ethan truly afraid of is you. The color drained from Margaret's face. Grace and Linda stood frozen, their breaths shallow, waiting for what would happen next. Tyler didn't wait for Margaret's reply. He turned and headed for the stairs, his voice tight with rage. I'm checking the security footage. And if I find out you've been hurting my son. Margaret's mask cracked for a split second, revealing something sharp and feral underneath. Tyler, do not go up those stairs. But he didn't stop. Not this time, not anymore. For the first time, he finally understood what Ava had been trying to warn him about. And for the first time, Margaret realized she was losing control. Ava didn't sleep that night. She sat on her couch with her laptop open, the nanny cam interface glowing across her face as she watched the little teddy bear's location update on the screen. Hours earlier, after careful planning, she had managed to slip the bear into a small package and leave it on the Weston property gate, with a handwritten label addressed to Grace. It wasn't unusual. Ava had often ordered small toys or art supplies for Ethan, and the staff was used to receiving parcels on her behalf. Grace, terrified and guilt-ridden, would bring it inside without a second thought, and she had. At 8:12 p.m., the nanny cam activated. The bear was inside the Weston mansion. Ava exhaled in relief. She didn't know she'd been holding. Now all she had to do was wait. She watched Ethan's room appear on screen, soft blue walls, scattered plush toys, the small desk where he colored, the framed photos of him and Tyler fishing last summer. The camera perched on a cozy shelf across the room. The familiar view made Ava smile for a brief second, before pain rushed in again. She wanted to be there beside him. She wanted to tell him everything would be okay. But this was the closest she could get for now. She leaned forward slightly as the feed stabilized. Ethan was curled under the blanket, asleep but restless, tossing gently every few minutes. Tyler sat beside him, hunched over, exhaustion carved into every angle of his body. He brushed a hand over Ethan's hair with aching tenderness, then stood and walked to the doorway. He paused, almost hesitating before stepping out. The room grew still. Ava stared at the screen, every muscle in her body tensed with anticipation. She knew Margaret wouldn't approach Ethan while Tyler was nearby. But the moment Tyler distanced himself, the danger grew. She just needed proof. She needed the kind of evidence no one, not even Margaret Weston, could talk her way out of. Minutes passed. Then footsteps echoed faintly across the feed. Ava straightened, her pulse quickening. The door creaked open, and a slim figure stepped inside. Margaret, Her posture was pristine as always, her movements controlled with eerie precision. She walked toward Ethan's bed with the purposeful stride of someone who believed the entire house belongs to her, and that its occupants did, too. Ava felt her stomach twist. Margaret sat on the edge of the mattress, smoothing the blanket with a delicacy that didn't reach her expression. She studied Ethan's sleeping face with a scrutinizing intensity, as though inspecting something flawed rather than cherished. Ava leaned so close to the screen her breath fogged the edge of the laptop. Margaret began to speak, her voice a low murmur the microphone picked up faintly. "You make everything harder," she whispered. "You always have. You cry over nothing, you disrupt the house, you cling to Ava like she's some kind of savior. You're too sensitive, Ethan. Too weak." Ava felt her blood run cold. Margaret reached for Ethan's shoulder and gave it a hard shake. The boy jerked awake with a small gasp, disoriented and frightened. "Grandma," he whispered, voice trembling. Margaret's face tightened. "Be quiet. You woke me earlier with all your fussing. Do you know how exhausting it is keeping order around here?" Ethan's lower lip quivered. Ava gripped the laptop so tightly her knuckles ached. Margaret continued, "And now look what you've done. You made your father send Ava away. She won't be coming back. That woman was a threat to this family, and you clung to her like a lost puppy." "Pathetic," Ethan whimpered, curling inward. Margaret reached down and grabbed one of his drawings off the bedside table, a cheerful picture of Ethan holding hands with Ava. Without hesitation, she tore it straight down the middle. Ethan let out a small, broken cry. "Stop," he whispered. "Please stop." Margaret leaned closer, her voice cold enough to freeze bone. "This is for your own good. I won't tolerate weakness, and you will not embarrass my son with your constant outbursts." Ava felt her throat lock, her vision wavered. She wanted to scream at the screen, to reach through it, to snatch Ethan out of Margaret's reach. Margaret continued, "You will stay in your room unless your father calls for you. You will not make noise. You will control your emotions. And if you disobey," she yanked the blanket off him, exposing the boy's shaking frame. "I will take you back to the shed, and this time you'll stay there longer." Ethan's breath hitched sharp, panicked. Margaret stood, smoothed her blouse, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she turned back. "This family needs discipline. Something Ava could never give you." The door shut behind her. Ethan curled into a ball, shaking uncontrollably. Ava's heart cracked open. Tears blurred her vision. This was the confirmation she'd dreaded but needed. Margaret was the abuser. Margaret had orchestrated everything. Ava wiped at her cheeks with trembling hands and tapped the screen to save the recording. She sent it to a secure backup, then another, then a third. She wasn't losing this proof, not after everything Ethan had endured. Just as she prepared to close the laptop, another figure appeared in the feed. Tyler. He stepped back into the room, fatigue weighing him down, and moved toward the bed to check on Ethan. The boy immediately reached for him, tears spilling as he pressed his face into his father's chest. Tyler frowned deeply, running a hand over Ethan's back. "Hey, what happened?" Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. Margaret's threat had clamped around his throat like a vise. Tyler pulled back slightly to look at him. "Did someone come in?" Ethan froze. Ava's breath stilled. Tyler waited. Ethan swallowed, his small voice cracking. "I don't want to get in trouble." Tyler stiffened. Something changed in his eyes. A shift Ava had never seen before, a spark of alarm, of realization starting to take shape. "No one's going to get you in trouble," Tyler promised gently. "Tell me what happened." Ethan hesitated, tears sliding across his cheeks. "Grandma said if I told she'd put me back in the shed." Tyler's expression shattered. Shock, horror, rage, confusion, all at once. Ava watched as he held Ethan tighter, as if afraid the child might break apart in his arms. She saw the exact moment the truth sank into him, not slowly, not subtly, but with the force of an avalanche. He had blamed the wrong person. He had driven away the one woman who protected his son. Margaret wasn't strict, she was cruel. Dangerous, capable of far more than he ever imagined. Tyler looked toward the door, his jaw clenching with a fury Ava recognized, pure, righteous, uncontrollable. And as Ethan cried softly into his father's chest, Tyler whispered two words Ava never thought she'd hear him say. "Oh God." He pressed a shaking hand to Ethan's back. "What have I done?" On the other side of the city, watching through her laptop, Ava whispered the same words. But unlike Tyler, she wasn't frozen. She was ready. Ready to expose Margaret Weston, ready to protect Ethan, and ready to fight her way back into the truth. Tyler didn't move for a long moment after Ethan's broken confessions slipped into the room. He sat frozen at the edge of his son's bed, one hand supporting the back of Ethan's shaking shoulders, the other fisted tightly against his thigh. His breath came shallow and even, his mind racing in jagged, uncontrollable bursts as the truth clawed its way to the surface. He looked down at the small boy curled into him, his son, trembling from fear no child should ever know, and every assumption he had clung to earlier collapsed under the weight of that single revelation. Margaret had threatened him. Margaret had hurt him. Margaret had lied. And he, blind, furious, protective but misguided, had sent Ava away because of it. Tyler pressed his eyes shut for a second, his jaw tightening until it hurt. Regret washed through him so forcefully he almost choked on it. But regret wasn't enough. Not now. Action mattered. Protection mattered. Fixing the damage mattered. Ethan, he said softly, brushing the boy's hair back, I need you to stay here. I'm going to fix this. I promise. Ethan's fingers clutched his shirt. Dad, don't let her take me again. That plea cut deeper than any blade. Tyler leaned down and kissed the top of his head. I won't, he vowed. No one is taking you anywhere. He gently tucked the blanket around him, making sure the boy felt cocooned and secure before stepping away from the bed. Ethan reached for him one last time and Tyler squeezed his hand. I'll be right back. He left the room with a determination that didn't waver, his steps steady despite the anger burning beneath his ribs. He moved down the hallway with controlled fury, each footstep echoing faintly through the upper floor. With every stride, pieces of the past weeks snapped into place, the bruises Ethan had avoided explaining, his sudden flinches, his anxious behavior whenever Margaret appeared. Tyler had written it off as childhood nerves. How could he not have seen the truth? At the top of the stairs, he saw movement in the foyer below. Margaret stood near the console table arranging a vase of fresh flowers, her posture impeccable, her expression serene, as though she wasn't the reason her grandson had trembled in fear minutes ago, as though she wasn't the reason Tyler's world was rapidly unraveling. She looked up the moment she sensed him. Her smile curled gracefully into place. Tyler, is everything all right? You look pale. Tyler descended the stairs with slow, deliberate steps. His mother's eyes watched him carefully, the same way she surveyed business partners, waiting for any sign of weakness to exploit. We need to talk, he said, his voice low but steady. Margaret tilted her head. Of course. Is Ethan still upset? The poor boy has been through too much today. Yes, Tyler replied. Too much. He reached the bottom of the staircase and stopped a few feet from her. The air between them thickened instantly. Margaret stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on his arm, the gesture she'd used thousands of times to guide him, soothe him, influence him. But Tyler didn't budge. He stared at her hand until she withdrew it. Margaret blinked, a flicker of confusion breaking through her composure. Tyler, what's wrong? He inhaled through his nose, slow and controlled. Ethan told me what really happened tonight. Her expression froze for only a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Tyler noticed. Margaret recovered quickly, producing a soft, sympathetic frown. My love, he's traumatized. Children imagine things when they're scared. He didn't imagine anything, Tyler snapped. The crack of his voice startled even himself, but he didn't apologize, not this time. Margaret's lips pressed together. What did he say? He took a step closer, towering slightly over her. He said you threatened to put him back in the shed. The faintest quiver passed through Margaret's eyes. Grace and Linda, who had been dusting the hallway nervously, froze in place. Margaret straightened. Tyler, that child is confused. He's been manipulated by Ava, filled with nonsense, and stop talking about Ava, Tyler growled. This isn't about her anymore. Margaret lifted her chin. She targeted you, Tyler. She used your son as leverage. She didn't do anything, he cut in sharply. But you did. The shift in Margaret was subtle but unmistakable. The warmth drained from her expression. The softness vanished. What remained was clean, sharp calculation. You retired, she said calmly, and overwhelmed. I understand. But if you were about to accuse me of something, I would strongly advise you to choose your words carefully. Tyler's jaw clenched. I don't need to choose my words carefully. I need the truth. Margaret's gaze hardened. I am the truth. Not tonight, he shot back. Not anymore. She stared at him, her eyes narrowing gradually. What exactly are you implying? Tyler didn't hesitate. Did you lock Ethan in the shed? The foyer fell still. Grace and Linda stood frozen, their faces drained. Margaret's mouth curved into a cold smile. Do you truly believe I would ever harm my grandson? Tyler didn't answer right away. He studied her, the tension in her shoulders, the flicker of panic beneath the surface, the warning in her stance. She sensed she was losing control. For a woman like Margaret Weston, that was unforgivable. Yes, he finally said, I believe it now. Margaret inhaled sharply, her eyes widening in offense or perhaps fear. How dare you? How dare you hurt him? He countered. How dare you lie to me? Margaret stepped forward, lowering her voice sharply. I raised you. Everything you are, your success, your reputation, your stability is because of me. You owe me respect. I owe Ethan protection, Tyler snapped. And you are a danger to him. For the first time, Margaret's mask cracked fully. Her nostrils flared, her eyes flashing with something fierce and territorial. I am the only one who understands discipline in this household. You have let that boy become soft. Ava made him weaker. Someone had to intervene. Tyler's blood boiled. You call scaring him discipline? Margaret didn't flinch. Children must learn boundaries. Threatening to lock him in a shed, Tyler demanded, ripping his drawings. He needs structure, she insisted. He needs to be molded before it's too late. He's 7, Tyler seethed. He needs safety. He needs love. Not whatever twisted version of structure you think you re-providing. Margaret's voice sharpened like a blade. A weak child becomes a weak man. I toughened you, and look where you are now. Tyler shook his head slowly. No. You broke me. And now you're trying to break him. Margaret stepped back as if struck. For the first time in years, maybe ever, she didn't have a ready answer. Tyler didn't stop. Ethan told me the truth, and I'm going to protect him. Margaret's eyes narrowed into slits. You will regret siding against me. Tyler took a final step closer, his voice low and dangerous. The only thing I regret is not seeing who you truly are sooner. Margaret stared at him, her fury coiled tight beneath the surface. But the battle was already shifting. Tyler had seen too much. Ethan had spoken too much. The cracks in Margaret's control were widening, and soon they would split wide open. Tyler turned away from her, heading back up the stairs to his son, his priority, his anchor, the one he had failed to protect but would never fail again. Behind him, Margaret stood rigid in the center of the foyer, her jaw tense, her eyes cold with fury and something darker. She wasn't finished, not yet, but neither was Tyler. Tyler stood outside Ethan's room long after he tucked his son back into bed, his hand still resting on the doorknob, as if unsure whether letting go would cause the fragile moment inside to crumble. He had whispered to Ethan that everything would be different now, that no one would ever hurt him again, that his father finally understood. But as he closed the door gently, he knew there was another promise he had to keep, one he owed to someone else he had wronged. Ava. Her name pressed onto his chest like a weight he couldn't shake off. The memory of her face when he told her to leave kept replaying in savage loops, the shock, the betrayal, the heartbreak. He had thrown her out, accused her, blamed her for something she didn't do, something his own mother had done. He scrubbed a hand through his hair and walked down the hallway with determined strides. He needed to find Ava. He needed to look her in the eyes and apologize, not just with words, but with action, with truth, with everything she deserved after what he had put her through. He grabbed his keys from the console table and headed for the front door. As he opened it, a voice drifted into the foyer. Leaving now, are we? Margaret stood near the bottom of the staircase, her arms crossed, her expression carefully composed but tight around the edges. The confrontation from earlier had left fractures in her control. Tyler didn't slow. Yes, he said, pulling the door wider. Margaret's heels clicked sharply as she approached. Where? Out. He stepped onto the porch. She followed, her tone sharpening. You were going to her? Tyler turned, jaw clenched. I am. Margaret's eyes flashed. Tyler, that woman is dangerous. She's not, he snapped, and she never was. Margaret's voice rose with urgency. You being manipulated. She's turned Ethan against this family. She's turned you know. Tyler cut in, the force of the words stopping her mid-sentence. The only person who's been manipulating this family is you. Margaret's face hardened. You making a mistake. Tyler shook his head. The mistake was letting you near my son. The shock that crossed Margaret's expression was genuine this time, sharp, wounded, affronted. She had always believed she held unwavering power over her son. She had underestimated the strength of Tyler's love for Ethan, and the depth of guilt now fueling him. Don't leave this house, she said quietly, almost dangerously. If you walk out that door, nothing will be the same. Tyler stepped onto the front walkway. Good. He didn't look back, not when he reached the driveway. Not when the door slammed behind him. Not when Margaret's furious footsteps retreated into the house. He climbed into his car, tightened his grip on the steering wheel, and took a deep breath that nearly trembled out of him. He put the car in drive and sped down the street, the familiar Brentwood neighborhood passing in streaks of gold and shadow as dusk settled across Los Angeles. Please be home, he prayed silently. Please let me fix this. 10 minutes later, he parked outside her apartment complex, a modest 2-story building with white stucco walls and a small courtyard lined with cheap potted plants. It looked painfully distant from the luxurious world he had dragged her into. Tyler stared at the stairwell leading up to her unit. His chest tightened. He wasn't used to this feeling, this vulnerability, this fear of being turned away. But he deserved that fear. He deserved worse. He took the steps 2 at a time and stood outside her door, his hand hovering just short of knocking. He swallowed hard and forced himself to rap his knuckles against the wood. No answer. He knocked again, louder this time. Ava, he called softly. It's me, still nothing. Anxiety stabbed into him. She would ignore him, would she? Had he broken her trust so completely? He leaned closer to the door. Ava, I know you re there. Please, I need to talk to you. After a long pause, he heard faint footsteps. The lock clicked. The door cracked open only an inch, the chain still fastened. One green eye appeared in the narrow gap, red around the edges from crying or exhaustion. Or both. Why are you here? She asked, her voice raw. Tyler's heart clenched. He stepped closer, resting his hand on the doorframe. I need to see you. No, Ava replied. Not after what you said to me. Not after what you accused me of. I know, he whispered. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She didn't open the door. He didn't blame her. Ava, he continued, his voice thick, I was wrong. Completely wrong. Ethan, he told me what really happened. The air shifted. Ava's breath caught. He told you? Yes, Tyler said. He told me everything. About the shed. About the threats. About my mother. Ava closed her eyes briefly, anguish cutting across her face. So now you believe me. I should have believed you from the beginning. She didn't respond. The chain stayed in place. Tyler took a shaky breath. Ava, you have every right to hate me. You have every right to slam the door in my face. But I'm begging you, please let me make this right. A long moment passed. Then, slowly, very slowly, the door closed, the chain rattled, and she opened it fully. Ava stood in front of him wearing a loose sweater, her hair pulled back, her expression guarded but no longer entirely closed off. Tyler stepped inside only when she moved aside. The apartment was quiet, warm, softly lit. Her suitcase still lay at the foot of the couch, half unpacked. She looked small, wounded, and strong all at once. Say what you came to say, Ava murmured. Tyler turned toward her, emotion tightening his throat. I'm sorry, he said again. For not listening. For doubting you. For letting my anger blind me. For letting my mother manipulate me. Ava crossed her arms, hugging herself. Do you even understand what that felt like? After everything I did for Ethan. Tyler nodded, shame burning through him. I do now. Ava's eyes glistened, though she blinked the tears back. I loved that boy, she whispered. I still do, he loves you too, Tyler said softly. He asked for you after he calmed down. He wanted to know where you went. Ava inhaled shakily, turning slightly away, her voice breaking. I didn't want to leave him, I know. Tyler stepped closer, hesitant. I saw the way you cared for him. I saw who he was becoming with you and his life brighter, kinder, safer. And I destroyed that because I let fear take over. Ava didn't move. Tyler continued. I promise you this, Margaret is never getting near him again. Ava looked up sharply. You mean that? IV never meant anything more. For the first time since he arrived, something inside her expression cracked, not trust, not forgiveness, but a small opening toward both. I have something, she said suddenly. Proof, evidence of what she did. Tyler froze. You do? Ava nodded. I set up a camera. It recorded her in Ethan's room. Tyler felt his breath lose its rhythm. Ava, show me. She reached for her laptop, opened it, and angled the screen toward him. The footage began to play. And as Margaret's actions filled the screen, Tyler Weston felt his world shift into a place he could never return from. When the video ended, he closed the laptop gently and looked at Ava with a mix of devastation and gratitude. Thank you, he whispered, for saving my son. Ava's eyes filled with tears. What happens now? Tyler stepped forward and took her hands carefully, reverently. Now, he said, I fight for him. For you, for all of us. And for the first time since the nightmare began, Ava allowed herself to hope. Margaret Weston had survived too many battles in her life to mistake the shift she felt in her son. The moment Tyler stormed past her, jaw tight, eyes full of fury she hadn't seen since he was a teenager, Margaret knew she had lost control, at least temporarily. Losing control was something she had never tolerated. Not in business, not in her household, and certainly not within her own family. She stood in the center of the foyer long after the front door shut behind him, her heartbeat drumming with a restrained fury. Tyler was going to Ava. She could feel it. That girl, no, that woman had managed to plant herself deep into her son's emotions, deeper than Margaret realized. She walked toward the staircase, her heels tapping sharply against the marble floor as she ascended. The house felt heavier now, as if rebelling against her command. She found Grace and Linda huddled near the hallway wall on the second floor, whispering with frantic energy. Their guilty looks snapped upward the moment they saw her. "You too," Margaret said, her tone slicing clean and icy. "Upstairs, now." The women scrambled behind her like obedient shadows. Margaret led them into her private sitting room and shut the door with a controlled force. The click of the latch echoed through their bones. She turned slowly, like a queen addressing subjects who had disappointed her. "Would either of you," she began, voice smooth but dangerous, "like to explain why my son suddenly doubts me?" Grace's throat bobbed as she struggled to answer. "Mrs. Weston, he pressed us. He kept asking, and we didn't know how to respond. You told him more than you were supposed to," Margaret snapped. Linda flinched. "We tried to avoid it, ma'am, but he was furious. He looked like he knew something." "Of course he knows something," Margaret murmured sharply, pacing in front of them. "Ava has found a way to influence him. The woman always had a talent for manipulation." Grace mustered courage. "She didn't seem manipulative, ma'am. She cared for Ethan, she loved him." Margaret whirled around so fast Grace stumbled backward. "Love," she repeated, her voice dipping into a dangerous register. "She loved his trust fund, his access, his privilege. I know women like her. I've dealt with them my entire life." Grace fell silent. Margaret took a deep breath, regaining her composure like pulling silk back over steel. "Regardless of your incompetence today, we still have time to fix this." She clasped her hands behind her back and narrowed her eyes. "Tyler is angry now, emotional. Anger clouds judgment, but anger fades, family remains. He will realize soon enough where his loyalties belong." Linda shifted nervously. "What do we do, Mrs. Weston?" Margaret looked at her as if she were a child asking why the sky was blue. "We regain control." She tapped her perfectly manicured nails against the back of a leather chair. "I need to know what Ava is planning. She is too calculating to leave without a fight." Linda exchanged an uneasy glance with Grace. Do you want us to follow her?" Margaret's smile sharpened. "No. I want you to be prepared. If Tyler confronts you again, you will hold firm. You will say exactly what I told you to say. You will not waver." Grace swallowed. "And if he already knows, then you deny it," Margaret said. "You deny everything. A lie, my dears, only works when everyone maintains the same script." Her voice dipped lower. "And you will maintain it." The room grew heavy. Margaret's expression shifted, her thoughts flickering rapidly behind her eyes. She moved to the window overlooking the long driveway leading out of the estate. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the property in a wash of deep orange and shadow. "Tyler is with her now," Margaret muttered. "He believes she is blameless. He believes she is the victim." She leaned a hand against the window frame. "But truth does not matter as much as power, and I still hold it." Grace and Linda were quiet, too quiet. Their fear was palpable, but beneath that panic Margaret detected something she did not like: hesitation. Doubt. It was growing in them, like rot. Margaret turned sharply. "If either of you even consider turning against me, understand this: you will not only lose your jobs, you will lose every reference, every opportunity, every foothold in this city." Her smile was polite, her eyes were not. "I do not make threats, I make promises." Grace almost nodded, but Margaret cut her off with a raised finger. "And if Ava tries to contact you, tries to involve you, tries to push you into revealing something, she will fail. Because you will tell me immediately. Won't you?" The women nodded vigorously now, fear eclipsing any flicker of conscience. "Good," Margaret said softly. "We understand each other again." She dismissed them with a flick of her wrist. "Leave me." They scrambled out of the room. The door shut behind them, leaving Margaret alone with her thoughts. For the first time that day, her mask slipped. Her calm expression twisted into something far sharper, something primal. You little fool, Tyler, she murmured, running to her as if she's your salvation. She paced the room, the tension building like a storm pressing against her ribs. You think you've figured something out? You think one frightened child can destroy decades of order? She shook her head slowly. No. I shaped this family. I built it from ashes. I will not let an emotionally unstable child or the woman poisoning him tear it apart. She stopped pacing and stood before the mirror above her fireplace. Her reflection stared back at her elegant, poised, unwavering. You are not the villain, she whispered to herself. You are the protector. The only one strong enough to maintain control. She smoothed her hair, adjusted her pearl necklace, and lifted her chin. Tyler will return. He always does. But just as the words left her lips, her phone buzzed. She picked it up. A message from an unknown number flashed across the screen. You don't control the truth anymore. Margaret's eyes widened. Her grip tightened. A second message arrived. We have proof. Margaret froze. Proof. The word reverberated through her like a blow. She wasn't breathing for a moment, her entire chest rigid. She forced air back into her lungs. Impossible, she whispered. No one could have seen. Her voice stopped. Her eyes narrowed. Her mind raced through every possibility, every oversight. She turned her gaze toward Ethan's room. A thought struck her so violently she felt her pulse spike. A camera, she whispered. No, she wouldn't, but she knew Ava would. And could, and had motive. Margaret's fingers curled into a fist. Her expression darkened to something fierce and dangerous. You want war, she muttered, her voice trembling not with fear but rage. You'll have it. She reached for her phone again, this time dialing a number she rarely used. Someone answered within 2 rings. Mrs. Weston, a deep voice said. Margaret stared toward the stairs, her jaw tightening. I need a favor, she said. A serious one. She glanced once more toward Ethan's room. Something must be removed from this house before Tyler finds it. Her voice hardened. And I do mean anything. She hung up the phone and exhaled slowly, regaining her composure. Her reflection in the mirror watched her with cold approval. This is my family, she whispered. And I will not lose. But what Margaret Weston didn't know, what she could not even imagine, was that Tyler and Ava were already a step ahead, and the truth she feared most was no longer in the house. It was in Ava's hands. And there was no stopping what came next. Ava sat beside Tyler at her small dining table, the laptop open between them. Its screen paused on the incriminating footage of Margaret shaking Ethan awake. The room felt too quiet, too small for the bombshell truth that had reshaped everything. Tyler's hands remained pressed against his mouth, elbows braced on the table. His eyes locked on the image of his mother standing over his terrified son. Shame weighed on him so heavily he seemed unable to straighten. Ava watched him carefully. She wasn't sure if he would break apart or erupt into anger again, not at her, but at himself, at Margaret, at everything that had poisoned the last month of their lives. I should have protected him sooner, Tyler whispered finally, his voice raw. I should be seen it. I grew up with her. I should be recognized. Tyler, Ava interrupted gently. Margaret is an expert at hiding who she is. She fooled more than just you. He shook his head, his jaw tightening. But I believed her over you. Ava exhaled through her nose. You were scared, and she used that. It's what she does. Tyler turned toward her then, his eyes filled with remorse. You didn't deserve what I said to you, or how I treated you. The pain in her chest rose again. No, she agreed softly, I didn't. He swallowed hard. But I'm going to make this right. For Ethan. For you. For all of us. Ava closed the laptop gently, turning the screen away so he didn't have to stare at Margaret's face any longer. Then we need a plan. Tyler sat up straighter, wiping a hand across his jaw. Whatever it takes, Ava nodded. First, we need to secure the footage. I already routed the camera recordings to multiple backups, so if Margaret finds the bear, it won't matter. Good, Tyler said. She can destroy the house and it won't change anything. But then his expression darkened. Still, she knows something. She can feel it. And if she realizes we have proof, she'll lash out. Which is why, Ava continued, we need to move faster than she can. She leaned forward. The footage is enough to destroy her credibility. But if you and I confront her now, she'll deny everything and twist the story. She's used to winning through manipulation. She'll find some way to control the narrative unless we take it out of her hands completely. Tyler nodded slowly. So what's the play? Ava tapped her fingers lightly against the table as she organized her thoughts. Margaret operates through power, through image, through the fear she creates in people. To beat her, we need to take away her control and expose her where she can't spin the story. Legal action, Tyler said. Ava nodded. And more, CPS police. A lawyer who understands cases involving child endangerment. This isn't just discipline gone wrong, this is abuse. Psychological, emotional, and physical. Tyler inhaled deeply. I'll call my attorney tomorrow morning. Tonight, Ava corrected. Before she has time to act, he didn't argue. Instead, he grabbed his phone and typed quickly. Ava continued outlining their strategy. We also need Grace and Linda. They were crackling under pressure. They lied because they were terrified of Margaret. But people who lie out of fear eventually break when someone finally gives them safety. Tyler looked up. You think they'll flip? They already have. Ava's expression hardened. Margaret pushed them too far. They know the fallout is coming. And if we give them immunity, protection, maybe even a chance to keep their jobs elsewhere, they'll tell the truth. Tyler stood abruptly, pacing the small space between her kitchen counter and the living room doorway. It feels insane, he muttered. My own mother, doing this to Ethan, manipulating staff, lying to my face. Ava watched him move, understanding simmering inside her. Margaret had shaped him for decades. Dismantling that influence in one night was impossible. Pain would come first, destruction second, truth last. Tyler stopped and looked at her again. When did you know? She hesitated, then answered truthfully. The first time. Ethan flinched when she raised her voice. The way he shut down whenever she entered a room. The night he had a nightmare and begged me not to let her check on him. Tyler's expression collapsed into grief. Why didn't he tell me? Ava softened. He did, just not with words. Tyler pressed a hand to his forehead. I failed him. No, Ava said, rising from her chair and stepping closer. You were manipulated, like everyone else. But now you reawake. And that's what matters. Tyler's breath shook. He nodded. So what do we do next? Ava returned to the table, pulling the laptop closer and organizing the files she had saved: videos, timestamps, backup copies, recordings stored off-site. We gather everything, she said. We prepare statements. You call your lawyer. Tomorrow morning, you take Ethan to a pediatric psychologist for a professional evaluation. You document everything. And once we have it all, we bring it to the authorities, Tyler finished. Exactly. Tyler sat again, closer to her this time, their shoulders almost brushing as they reviewed the footage frame by frame, preparing to dismantle the woman who had fractured their lives. After several minutes, Tyler spoke again. Ava, I want you to come home, tonight. Ava looked up sharply. Tyler, Ethan needs you. He asked for you after you left. He trusts you. And he paused, choosing his words carefully. I want you there. I can't protect him alone. Ava exhaled slowly. The offer wasn't simple. Going back meant stepping directly into the battlefield. It meant facing Margaret. It meant risking everything. But she thought of Ethan's small trembling body, his broken voice, his trust. If I come back, she said softly, we do it together. No lies, no doubts. Tyler held her gaze. No doubts, he promised. After another moment of silence, Ava nodded. Then let's go. She gathered her things, slipped the laptop into its case, and grabbed the teddy bear camera just in case they needed to reposition it. Tyler waited by the door, watching her with a complicated mix of regret, gratitude, and something else, something deeper. She locked her apartment and walked with him toward the parking lot, the night air cool and calm compared to the storm gathering at the Weston estate. As they reached their cars, Tyler turned to her. Whatever happens next, he said, I'm with you. Ava nodded, sliding into her driver's seat. Then let's end this. They pulled out onto the street together, their headlights cutting through the dark as they made their way back to the place where everything had fallen apart, and where everything would be rebuilt. This time, they weren't walking into Margaret's world. This time, they were coming to take it back. Margaret stood in the center of her walk-in closet, the soft glow of recessed lighting spilling across rows of designer coats and tailored dresses. But none of the elegance she surrounded herself with could distract her from the growing earthquake in her chest. Tyler had left to be with Ava. He had abandoned her abandoned family for a woman who had infiltrated their home and ruined everything. And whether he realized it or not, he had declared war. Margaret lifted her phone again, staring at the last message from the unknown number. We have proof. Her nostrils flared. Proof meant exposure. Exposure meant loss. Loss meant humiliation, the one fate Margaret Weston refused to tolerate. She had spent a lifetime cultivating her image, powerful, composed, respected. She had survived her husband's affairs, The board's attempts to undermine her, the whispers from social circles who envied her influence. She had endured decades of private battles and always emerged immaculate. She would not lose to a nanny with a psychology degree and doe-eyed charm. Ava Coleman was nothing. Margaret would treat her accordingly. She took a steady breath and dialed the number she had called earlier, the man she kept on retainer for problem resolution. He answered in a low, gravelly voice. "Yeah, I need you at my house. Now," Margaret ordered. "A piece of evidence must be removed tonight." "What kind of evidence?" "The kind that destroys reputations." A beat of silence. "You understand I charge extra for speed. You'll receive double. Just get here." She hung up and steadied herself. She needed to eliminate the camera before Tyler returned. But first, she needed to regain control of the pieces on the board. She stepped out of her closet and made her way downstairs, her heels tapping in clipped, furious rhythm. The moment she reached the landing, Grace and Linda froze mid-conversation in the foyer. Their faces went pale. Margaret lifted her chin. "Upstairs," she instructed. "I need you to thoroughly clean Ethan's room. Remove clutter. Anything that looks out of place." Grace nodded, wringing her hands. "Why, yes, Miss Weston." Margaret narrowed her eyes. "Do not question me. Do not hesitate. Just do it." The women scrambled up the stairs. Margaret checked her watch. Tyler had been gone too long. That meant Ava had him. That meant the footage had already been shared. A sharp pulse of panic cut through her ribs, but she crushed it instantly. She was stronger than this. She always had a way out. She needed to strategize. She walked into the living room and began rehearsing her narrative. "Ethan is fragile," she muttered to herself. "Traumatized, he confuses dreams with reality. Ava exploited that." Her voice sharpened. "And Tyler will come around once the dust settles." She stopped in front of the window, staring out into the night. The long driveway stretched beneath street lamps, the gate standing open but unmoving. For a moment, her own reflection glared back at her, hard, elegant, relentless. "This is still my home," she whispered. Then headlights appeared at the gate. Margaret stiffened. A black car pulled in, then another, Tyler's car and Ava's. Margaret's pulse quickened, but she smoothed her blouse and stepped away from the window, head held high. If they were coming for war, she would greet them at the door. She walked to the foyer just as the front door swung open. Tyler entered first, jaw set, eyes dark with purpose. Ava followed, her expression steady, laptop bag in hand. Margaret smiled, perfectly controlled, perfectly polite. "Welcome home," she said. "I expected you might return with some confusion. I'm happy to clear things up." Tyler didn't respond. He stepped forward slowly, like a man holding back a storm. "We're not here for clarification," he said. "We're here for answers." Margaret's eyes flicked to Ava. "Of course you are." She folded her hands together. "Ava dear, I know you're upset. You've always been overly emotional." "Don't," Tyler snapped, stepping between them. "You don't talk to her, not anymore." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "So she speaks for you now?" "No," Tyler said, "but she's the only one who hasn't lied to me." The words sliced through Margaret like a blade. She felt the sting but didn't show it. "Tyler," she said calmly, "you are being manipulated by a clever young woman who has made you feel." "Stop," Ava said quietly. Margaret turned her head, surprised that Ava dared interrupt. "You lost," Ava continued. "It's over." Margaret laughed softly, a practiced, elegant sound. "Oh, my dear, nothing is over. You think you have some kind of advantage, a story, a frightened child's imagination." Ava reached calmly into her bag and withdrew the teddy bear. Margaret's smile faltered. Ava placed the bear on the foyer table between them. "Not a story," she said. "A recording." The color drained from Margaret's face. It was the smallest shift, but Tyler saw it. Ava leaned in slightly. "Would you like to hear the part where you threatened to lock Ethan in the shed? Or the part where you called him weak? Or maybe the part where he begged you to stop tearing his drawings?" Margaret's heartbeat thrashed now. She forced her mouth into a controlled line. "You planted that. You fabricated it." "The camera was here," Ava said. "In your home, watching what you did." Margaret shot a sharp look toward the staircase. Grace and Linda hadn't returned yet, which meant they might have already discovered the bear. Time was slipping away. She needed to regain control now. "Tyler," Margaret said, turning to him with urgency she struggled to hide. "You cannot truly believe I do," he said with finality she had never heard from him before. Margaret froze. Tyler continued, "And I saw the fear in Ethan myself. I heard him say what you did. You can't spin this. You can't rewrite it." Margaret stepped forward, her voice rising. "I raised you. I protected you. I shaped you into the man you are. No, Tyler said sharply. You shaped me into someone afraid of disappointing you. Into someone who couldn't see the truth right in front of him. But that ends tonight. Margaret's lips trembled with fury. I did everything for this family, and you nearly destroyed it, Tyler replied. Ava stepped closer beside him, a steady presence at his side. You hurt Ethan, she said softly. You broke his trust, you terrorized him for weeks, and you blamed me for it. Margaret's mask cracked completely now. You don't belong here, she spat. You never did. You invaded what was mine. Tyler's voice boomed through the foyer. He's not yours. Margaret flinched. He's my son, Tyler said, and Ethan is my child, and I will protect him from you, even if that means removing you from this house forever. Margaret's breath hitched, outrage twisting her features as she stared at them both. You wouldn't dare. Tyler pulled his phone from his pocket. Try me. He began dialing his attorney. Margaret's eyes widened as she realized the truth. For the first time in her life, she was losing. And this time she couldn't charm, manipulate, or terrify her way back into control. She was trapped. Cornered. Exposed. As Tyler raised the phone to his ear, Margaret whispered, breaking apart for the first time. You can't do this to me. But Tyler didn't look at her. He didn't pause. He didn't waver. Watch me, he said. And in that moment, Margaret Weston understood something she had never believed possible. Her reign was ending. One of the most powerful lessons this story teaches is the danger of misplaced trust and how easily love can cloud our judgment when fear enters the picture. Tyler's journey reveals how even the most intelligent, responsible adults can make devastating mistakes when they allow panic to override reason. His instinct as a father was pure: protect Ethan at any cost. But that instinct was turned against him by the person he trusted most, proving that danger often hides behind familiarity and lineage rather than outsiders. The story reminds us that trust should never be given blindly, and that true love, whether romantic or parental, requires the courage to question, the humility to listen, and the willingness to look beyond assumptions. Tyler learned that strength isn't found in reacting with force, but in acknowledging your own failures, seeking the truth, and taking accountability when you've been wrong. Another profound message is about the complexity of power when it exists inside families. Margaret represents a kind of generational authority that is often romanticized, the matriarch who claims her control comes from love, discipline, and tradition. But the story exposes how easily that authority can twist into entitlement, possessiveness, and cruelty. Margaret believed she had the right to shape everyone else's life because she was the protector of the family legacy. In reality, she weaponized loyalty, fear, and emotional manipulation to maintain dominance. Her version of discipline was a mask for control. Her love was conditional and destructive. The lesson here is that family alone does not justify power, only compassion, honesty, and responsibility do. A toxic parent doesn't stop being toxic simply because they raised you. Blood ties do not excuse emotional abuse, nor do they bind a person to accept it forever. Tyler's decision to break free from his mother's influence is symbolic of reclaiming autonomy from generational harm. A key thread woven throughout the story is the resilience of those who choose to protect others even when it comes at great personal cost. Ava embodies that resilience. She loses her home, her reputation, and the trust of the man she loves, all because she refused to compromise her integrity. Even when cast out and heartbroken, she doesn't retreat into bitterness or despair. Instead, she channels her pain into purpose, saving Ethan, the child she loves deeply and selflessly. Ava teaches us that compassion is not passive. It's courageous. She reminds us that doing the right thing often requires sacrifice, and that protecting the vulnerable sometimes means standing up to those far more powerful than yourself. Her strength is not loud or dramatic, but steady and unwavering, the kind of strength that changes lives quietly and permanently. Through her actions, the story highlights that true family is built not from wealth or bloodline, but from love, loyalty, and the willingness to fight for someone when they cannot fight for themselves. Ethan's experience brings forward the most essential lesson of all: children are often the clearest truth tellers in situations adults complicate. His fear wasn't subtle. His reactions weren't ambiguous. He tried to communicate his trauma in the only ways he knew: withdrawal, flinching, nightmares, and fragile whispers. But adults, wrapped in their own narratives, biases, and beliefs, often overlook these signs. This part of the story serves as a reminder that children rarely lie about fear. Their bodies speak even when their words are too small or frightened to come out. Listening to them isn't just an act of love, it's a moral duty. Ethan teaches us that emotional safety is as important as physical safety, and that the wounds caused by someone trusted, a caretaker, a grandparent, a parent, run deeper than anything else. His healing begins only when the adults around him finally choose to see him, hear him, and believe him. Finally, the story offers a broader reflection on truth, how fragile it is, how easily distorted by power, and how persistently it fights to be uncovered. Margaret tried to rewrite reality through intimidation, manipulation, and fear, believing power could protect her from consequences. But truth, when held with conviction, evidence, and courage, cannot be buried forever. It emerges through the cracks, through the whispers, through the trembling voice of a child, through the determination of someone who refuses to look away. Ava's camera symbolizes more than proof, it symbolizes the strength of seeing clearly when others refuse to. Tyler's transformation symbolizes the painful but necessary act of confronting truth, even when it shatters your understanding of those you love. And Ethan's courage symbolizes the quiet endurance of truth inside those who suffer silently until someone finally chooses to fight for them. In the end, the story teaches that love is not blind obedience. Love is not control. Love is not sacrifice offered to the wrong person. Love is protection, honesty, accountability, and bravery. Tyler learns it, embodies it. Ethan survives because of it. And Margaret's downfall is the inevitable truth that power without compassion eventually destroys itself. The story reminds us that families can heal from trauma, but only when truth is brought into the light, when accountability replaces denial, and when love is redefined not as authority but as unconditional care. It's a lesson about reclaiming what truly matters: safety, trust, empathy, and the freedom to build a family rooted not in fear, but in genuine love. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss upcoming videos. If you have any suggestions or questions, feel free to leave a comment below. I'd really love to hear your feedback. Thank you for watching until the end.